When my wife and her lover devised a plan to steal my life's work, they thought their scheme was as smooth and flawless as the cars I restore. They did not count on me finding their secrets hidden in a place I built with my own two hands. I did not confront them. I just smiled, agreed to their sensible plan, and began building one last car, a magnificent, gleaming Trojan Horse on 4 wheels. By the time they were driving away in their prize, laughing at the old fool they had just left in their dust, the car itself was slowly, beautifully, and very publicly telling the entire city the truth about who they really were. Before we get this story into gear, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, what is the most priceless thing you have ever built with your own hands? My name is Henry Clark, and at 76 years old, my hands are permanently stained with the memory of grease and honest work. Here in Nashville, Tennessee, my world is a sprawling, cathedral-like garage filled with the ghosts of American muscle and the glorious scent of gasoline, leather, and high-quality wax. I am a classic car restorer, and for 50 years, I have been breathing life back into forgotten beauties. Each car in this garage, from the '67 Mustang Fastback to the '58 Corvette, is a piece of history I have painstakingly resurrected, bolt by bolt. This collection, this garage, it is not just my work, it is my soul, the legacy I built after my first wife passed. My second wife, Evelyn, is a woman who prefers the scent of expensive perfume to motor oil. I met her 12 years ago, a beautiful, charismatic woman who seemed to appreciate my passion. She called my cars magnificent sculptures. I thought she understood that they were more than just metal, that they were rolling testaments to a time when things were built with pride and meant to last. I was wrong. Lately, our conversations have been filled with a quiet, persistent hum of dissatisfaction. "Henry, darling," she began one evening, her voice smooth as she looked around my pristine workshop. "Don't you ever want to just be done? To wash the grease from under your fingernails for good? We're not getting any younger. I dream of us in Paris, sipping wine, not stuck here with these dusty old relics." She saw my life's work, my entire net worth, not as a source of pride, but as an anchor holding her back from the life of European luxury she felt she deserved. Then came Landon. Evelyn introduced him as a brilliant financial advisor, a man who could help us plan a smarter, more secure retirement. Landon was slick, with a politician's smile and eyes that moved too quickly. He spoke of trusts, tax shelters, and estate planning with a dizzying fluency that was clearly meant to impress and intimidate. He and Evelyn began to work as a team, a pair of concerned, forward-thinking partners guiding the old-fashioned, sentimental car guy into the modern world. "Henry, the inheritance tax on a collection like this would be crippling for Evelyn if something were to happen to you," Landon explained, his tone grave and serious as he spread charts across my workbench. "The most prudent course of action is to transfer the titles of the cars into a flexible living trust. It protects the assets from taxes and ensures a smooth, seamless transition." Evelyn would nod along, her face a mask of loving concern. "It's about protecting our future, darling," she would say, her hand on my arm. "Landon is just helping us make the sensible choice. I don't want to be left having to deal with a complicated mess." They were so good, their performance so perfectly synchronized, that a part of me almost believed them. They were preying on my love for her, on my desire to see her secure and happy. They made their plan sound like an act of love. But I am a man who has spent a lifetime listening to engines. I can tell when a single piston is misfiring, when a bearing is off by 1,000th of an inch, and their harmony felt wrong. There was a subtle dissonance, a vibration I could not quite place, but one that put me on edge. The first concrete sign of trouble was a small one. It was Evelyn's car, a beautiful 1965 convertible I had restored for her as a wedding gift. She brought it in, complaining of a strange little rattle. I told her I would take a look. As I was inspecting the undercarriage, my hand brushed against a small, hidden panel in the passenger side door, a secret compartment that was a rare feature on that particular model. I had discovered it during the initial restoration, but had never mentioned it to her, thinking of it as a quaint little secret of the car's history. Curiosity got the better of me. I worked the hidden latch, and the panel popped open. Inside was not an old map or a forgotten pair of driving gloves. It was a small leather-bound notebook. My heart went cold. I knew it wasn't mine. I opened it, and there, in the quiet of my garage, surrounded by the honest, beautiful machines I had built, the carefully polished engine of their betrayal was laid bare. The trap was set, but it was their own. And I was about to use my own set of tools to make sure it backfired spectacularly. The notebook was small and unassuming, but it felt as heavy as an engine block in my hands. The pages were filled with Landon's neat, precise handwriting, a chilling counterpoint to the ugly words they contained. It was a ledger of their affair, with dates and locations of their secret meetings. But it was far more than a simple diary of infidelity. It was a business plan. There were detailed notes from their conversations, strategies on how to best manage me, how to play on my emotions, my age, and my supposed lack of financial sophistication. One entry read, H is sentimental about the cars. Use E-security as the primary emotional lever. He will do anything to protect her future. They had analyzed me, broken me down into a set of predictable emotional responses to be exploited. The most damning pages were at the back. There were drafts of the trust agreement Landon had presented to me, but these versions had handwritten notes in the margins, notes that were not on the official copy. Next to a complex legal clause, Landon had written, "This gives E full liquidation power. H will not understand the nuance." They were not just planning to manage my assets. They were planning a hostile takeover of my entire life's work. There were even financial projections, calculations of the auction value of each of my cars, followed by a budget for their new life together, a life of apartments in Paris and villas in Tuscany, all funded by the sale of my soul. The betrayal was not a single act. It was a meticulously engineered project, and I had been the unwitting vehicle for their ambitions. I placed the notebook back in the secret compartment, my mind a maelstrom of cold, quiet fury. I closed the panel, the soft click of the latch sounding like the cocking of a gun. The rattle Evelyn had complained about was a loose bolt on the glove box hinge, a simple fix. But I had found the real problem, a rot that went far deeper than a simple mechanical flaw. That evening, Evelyn came home, and I had to give the performance of my life. I met her with a smile. "Fix that rattle for you, honey," I said, handing her the keys. "Just a loose bolt. She's running like a dream." "Oh, thank you, darling," she said, kissing my cheek. Her kiss felt like ice. "Have you given any more thought to Landon's proposal? The trust? He's waiting on our decision." I looked at her, at this beautiful stranger who had shared my bed for 12 years, and I felt a profound sense of detachment. The love was gone, burned away by the acid of her deceit. All that remained was a project. I said, my voice steady. "You're right. It's the sensible thing to do. Let's move forward with it." The look of triumphant relief on her face was almost comical. She hugged me tightly. "Oh, Henry, I knew you'd see it my way. You're doing the right thing for us." She thought she was hugging a defeated old man. She was embracing a time bomb. The next few weeks were a surreal dance of deception. I met with Landon and Evelyn, and we went over the final trust documents. I asked a few simple, clarifying questions, enough to maintain my persona as a man who was trying his best to keep up. Landon would answer with a patient, condescending smile, exchanging subtle, knowing glances with Evelyn. They were so proud of their own cleverness, so certain of my ignorance. They had no idea that I had spent the previous night with my own lawyer, a man I trusted implicitly, who had added a few, Very subtle clauses of my own to the agreement clauses that would only become relevant after the trust was signed and activated. My true work, however, took place in the garage, late at night, long after Evelyn was asleep. I had told them I wanted to complete one final project before I truly retired, a capstone to my career. I wanted to build Evelyn her ultimate dream car, a one-of-a-kind, fully restored 1961 Jaguar E-Type, one of the most beautiful cars ever designed. Evelyn was ecstatic. The Jag was her favorite, a car she felt embodied the glamour and sophistication she craved. She saw it as a final, beautiful trophy from her victory, a parting gift from the man she had so thoroughly swindled. For me, the car was something else entirely. It was a canvas. It was a Trojan horse. My plan required a very specific and very rare material. I made a call to a specialist paint supplier in Germany, a man I had worked with for years. I explained what I needed, a custom-mixed, multi-stage thermochromic paint. A paint that would hold one color when cool, but would react to a specific temperature, the ambient heat generated by the engine and exhaust system after about 20 minutes of driving, causing the top layer to become temporarily transparent and reveal a second color, or in my case, a message underneath. It was a technology rarely used on cars, prohibitively expensive and difficult to apply. But for this project, no expense was too great. The paint arrived a week later in a set of unmarked, climate-controlled canisters. The base layer was a brilliant, almost cartoonish, fire engine red. The top layer, the thermochromic coat, was a beautiful, elegant pearl white. The process was painstaking. I first painted the doors and hood of the Jaguar with the base red. Then, using custom-cut stencils, I carefully painted my messages onto the red background in a slightly darker shade, ensuring they would be clearly visible. On the driver's side door, in large, bold letters, the word Lear. On the passenger side, thief. And on the long, elegant hood, for all the world to see, adulterer. After the messages were dry, I began the difficult process of applying the thermochromic top coat. It required multiple, perfectly even layers, sprayed in a temperature-controlled environment. The result was breathtaking. The car was a flawless, gleaming pearl white. The red words underneath were completely invisible, buried beneath a layer of sophisticated, heat-sensitive deception. It was the most beautiful and the most treacherous thing I had ever built. The car was almost ready. The trap was almost set. I just needed the final signature on the trust documents, the act that would officially begin the countdown to their public humiliation. Do you believe some objects can carry a secret? Let me know in the comments if you've ever owned something with a hidden story. The day we were scheduled to sign the final trust documents was a performance of calculated theater. Evelyn dressed for the occasion in a sharp, elegant suit, the kind a savvy businesswoman would wear. Landon arrived at my garage with a polished leather briefcase, his smile radiating a triumphant, predatory charm. They were playing the parts of responsible, forward-thinking stewards of my legacy, and they played them to perfection. I, in turn, played my role as the sentimental, slightly overwhelmed husband. I let them guide me through the document, a thick stack of pages filled with impenetrable legal jargon. I would pause, squint at a page, and ask a simple question, which Landon would answer with a patient, practiced explanation. "This clause, Henry," he said, pointing to a particularly dense paragraph, "is just a standard liability shield. It protects the trust from any external claims, ensuring the assets remain secure for you and Evelyn." I knew from my own lawyer that this was the very clause that gave them the power to liquidate everything without my consent. But I just nodded, feigning a foggy understanding. The betrayal felt sharpest in these moments, not in the affair itself, but in this cold, clinical dismantling of my life's work, disguised as an act of loving care. They were using my trust as a weapon against me, turning the very concept of family security into a tool for theft. The moment of signing was heavy with unspoken meaning. Evelyn placed her hand on mine as I picked up the pen. "We're doing the right thing, darling," she whispered, her voice a perfect imitation of sincerity. "This is for us." I looked at her, at the woman I had once loved, and I signed my name. The ink felt like a final, irrevocable declaration of war. With that signature, the trust was active. In their minds, they now owned everything. My cars, my garage, my entire net worth. It was all under their control, just waiting for the final act of liquidation. The immediate consequence was a chilling shift in the atmosphere. Their kindness, which had always been a performance, now took on a new, more confident and proprietary edge. They started talking about my cars as our assets. They discussed auction houses and private collectors in front of me, as if I were a ghost in my own garage. The Shelby Cobra alone should fetch a pretty penny, Landon said one afternoon, strolling through my workshop with the air of a man taking inventory of his new possessions. Evelyn began making plans for the retirement party, a grand lavish affair to be held at a downtown Nashville hotel. It was, she said, a chance to give me a proper send-off and to thank our friends and the community for their years of support. I knew its true purpose. It was to be their victory lap, a public celebration of their successful heist before they disappeared into their new life. I went along with all of it, my quiet agreement fueling their arrogance. While they were busy planning their party, I was finishing mine. The Jaguar E-Type was in the final stages of its transformation. I spent a week on the engine, tuning it to perfection, ensuring it would run not just smoothly, but with enough heat to trigger the thoracomic paint at precisely the right time. I reupholstered the leather seats myself, the steady work of my hands a calming rhythm against the storm of my anger. The car was becoming a masterpiece of duality. On the outside, it was a symbol of their victory, a gleaming, pearl-white trophy. But underneath, it was my messenger, a vessel for a truth that was waiting for the right temperature to be revealed. My son, who knew nothing of the affair or the financial plot, called me, his voice full of worry. Evelyn had told him about the trust, framing it as a wonderful, responsible step. "Dad, are you sure about this?" he asked, giving up control of the collection. "It's your whole life." "Sometimes, son," I said, the words tasting like metal in my mouth, "you have to trust the people you love." It was a lie, and it pained me to say it, but I had to see this through to the end on my own terms. The final piece of my plan was a subtle legal maneuver my lawyer had devised. The trust documents they had so proudly watched me sign were, indeed, legally binding. However, the fine print I had added contained a vesting clause, a small, technical detail that stated the trust would not be fully and irrevocably transferred until a specific condition was met. The condition was the official, notarized transfer of the title of the new Jaguar E-Type into Evelyn's name, an act which we had all agreed would happen on the night of the retirement party as her final grand gift. They were so focused on acquiring the multi-million-dollar collection that they had paid no attention to the legal status of the single car they saw as a trinket. They had no idea that their entire scheme, their entire victory, hinged on the moment they happily and eagerly accepted the keys to their own public humiliation. They thought they were closing a deal. In reality, they were arming the bomb I had so carefully built. The betrayal was now legally in motion. Their arrogance was at its peak, and my beautiful, treacherous Trojan horse sat gleaming in the garage, ready for its one and only performance. You are about to hand your enemy the very thing they desire most. What goes through your mind in that final, quiet moment before the trap is sprung? Let me know in the comments. With the signing of the trust, a palpable shift occurred. Evelyn and Landon, believing their victory was legally secured, moved from a strategy of careful persuasion to one of arrogant, open planning. They were no longer trying to convince me. They were simply informing me of their decisions. The retirement party became their primary focus, a project that consumed their time and my money. Evelyn hired a high-end event planner, and our quiet home was suddenly filled with consultations about floral arrangements, catering menus, and lighting designs. She was planning a party fit for a king's coronation, and in her mind, she and Landon were the new monarchs. I watched it all with a detached, scholarly interest. I was a ghost at my own funeral. They would discuss the guest list in front of me, debating which of my old friends were important enough to invite. They talked about the auction houses they had contacted, weighing the merits of selling the collection off piece by piece versus as a single lot. A single lot to a European collector would be cleaner, Landon advised Evelyn one evening as I sat in my armchair, supposedly engrossed in a car magazine. Less paperwork, quicker payout. They had become so comfortable in their deception, so certain of my oblivion, that they were openly plotting the dismemberment of my life's work right in front of my face. My role in this charade was to be the perfect retiring legend. I gave interviews to local magazines and car blogs, all arranged by a publicist Evelyn had hired. I spoke in nostalgic tones about my long career, my love for the craft, and my decision to finally hang up my tools. I spoke of my desire to see my wife, Evelyn, happy and secure, and my trust in our financial advisor, Landon, to manage our future. I gave them the sound bites they wanted, building a public narrative of a graceful, willing retirement. Each interview was another stone I laid in the foundation of their public humiliation. The more the world saw me as a loving, trusting husband, the more monstrous their betrayal would appear when it was finally revealed. The centerpiece of my own plan, the Jaguar E-Type, was now complete. It sat in a private, locked section of my garage, covered by a silk sheet. It was a perfect, gleaming vision of pearl-white elegance. To anyone else, it was simply a masterpiece of restoration. To me, it was a time bomb, ticking silently. I needed to ensure its one and only performance would be flawless. My plan relied on the car being driven for at least 20 minutes in slow city traffic, allowing the engine heat to build up and trigger the thermochromic paint. Nashville's downtown traffic, I knew, would be my unwitting accomplice. I began making subtle preparations. I called the hotel where the party was being held and spoke to the valet manager, an old friend whose first car I had helped restore years ago. I told him I needed a special favor. I explained that my wife's new car would be unveiled at the party and that I wanted her first drive to be unforgettable. I arranged for him to ensure that when Evelyn and Landon left the party, their car would be brought around last and that their route out of the city would be a specific one, a route I knew would be choked with evening traffic and tourists, a route that would take them directly through the busiest, most well-lit parts of downtown Nashville. It was a simple request, and he was happy to oblige his old friend. My final act of preparation was a quiet conversation with my lawyer. We met one last time to review the final piece of the puzzle, the title for the Jaguar. The document was ready, a simple vehicle title transfer. But my lawyer had, at my request, attached a small, legally binding addendum to it. The addendum stated that the signing of the title and Evelyn's acceptance of the vehicle would constitute the final, official fulfillment of the conditions laid out in the trust's vesting clause. The moment she signed her name to accept her prize, the entire trust, with all of its contents, would become irrevocably and unchangeably active under the terms we had agreed upon, including my own hidden clauses that protected a significant portion of the assets in a way they would not discover until it was far too late. It was a beautiful legal checkmate. They needed her signature on the title to get the car, but that same signature would be the final nail in the coffin of their grand plan. They were so blinded by the glamour of the Jaguar, so eager to possess their trophy, that they would sign their own defeat without a second thought. The night before the party, I stood alone in my garage, the silence broken only by the low hum of the dehumidifier. I pulled the silk sheet off the Jaguar. It gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a perfect, innocent pearl white. It looked like a car built for a wedding, a celebration, a happy beginning. I ran my hand over the cool, smooth metal of the hood, feeling the hidden letters beneath the layers of paint. It was the most beautiful and most dangerous thing I had ever created. Everything was in place. The audience was invited. The stage was set. The getaway car was ready. And the drivers were blissfully, arrogantly, unaware that they were about to star in a very public and very humiliating final act. When you have laid a perfect trap, is the waiting the hardest part? Hit the like button if you think so, and tell me in the comments if you believe in the idea of poetic justice. The evening of my retirement party was a spectacle of calculated opulence. The hotel ballroom was awash in soft lighting and the scent of expensive flowers. A string quartet played quietly in the corner, a touch of class that was entirely Evelyn's. The room was filled with a mix of Nashville's elite, corporate suits, and the rougher-edged, honest faces of my old friends from the car restoration world. It was a collision of two worlds, my world and the one Evelyn so desperately wanted to inhabit. I stood near the entrance, dressed in a tuxedo that felt like a costume, playing my part as the guest of honor. I accepted handshakes and pats on the back, my face a mask of humble, bittersweet gratitude. "It's the end of an era, Henry," one of my old colleagues said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "Thank you for everything, son," I replied, my voice quiet. "But it's time to let the next generation take the wheel." Evelyn was in her element, a radiant queen surveying her new kingdom. She wore a stunning, backless evening gown and a diamond necklace. A recent gift from Landon, I now realized, glittered at her throat. She and Landon worked the room as a team, their movements fluid and synchronized. They were the picture of a happy, successful couple, the financial guru and the beautiful wife who had smartly guided their beloved patriarch into a secure future. They introduced me to their important guests, always with a hand on my arm, always with a story about my legendary career, always framing me as the precious relic whose legacy they were now charged with protecting. The entire event was a meticulously crafted lie, and I was its centerpiece. My son had flown in for the occasion. He stood by my side for much of the evening, his presence a source of both comfort and pain. He saw the lavish party, he saw his smiling stepmother, and he believed the narrative. "I'm glad you're doing this, Dad," he said, looking at Evelyn as she laughed with a city councilman. She seemed so happy. "You both deserve this." I just nodded, the guilt of my own deception a sharp, painful knot in my stomach. I hated that he would have to be hurt in the crossfire, but I knew the truth would be more damaging if it came out any other way. The plan began to unfold with the precision of a Swiss watch. The speeches began. A local business leader spoke about my contribution to the city's heritage. My son gave a heartfelt, emotional tribute that was difficult to hear. Then Landon took the stage. He spoke with his signature, oily charm about the importance of smart financial stewardship. He praised me as a man of great talent, but old-school business sense. He then praised Evelyn for her wisdom and foresight in helping to secure our family's future. It was a nauseating performance, and the crowd absorbed every word. Finally, it was Evelyn's turn. She walked to the stage, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Her speech was the pinnacle of her artifice. "My husband, Henry," she began, her voice trembling with perfectly feigned emotion, "is a genius, a craftsman, an artist. But his greatest gift has always been his heart. And it is my honor to spend the rest of my life protecting that heart and ensuring he has the peaceful, worry-free retirement he so richly deserves." She turned to me, her eyes glistening. "I love you, darling." The room erupted in applause. She had played her part to perfection. Now it was my turn. I walked to the stage, my steps slow and deliberate. I took the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "Thank you all for coming. I don't have much to say. My hands have always done my talking for me." I paused. For my final project, I wanted to build one last car. A car that represents everything my wife loves: elegance, beauty, and a touch of glamour. It's my gift to her, to thank her for these past 12 years. I gestured to the large double doors at the side of the ballroom. And I believe it's ready. On cue, the door swung open. 2 valets slowly drove the Jaguar E-Type onto a low stage that had been set up. It was a vision under the spotlights, a flawless, gleaming jewel of pearl-white perfection. The crowd gasped. It was automotive art. Evelyn's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with genuine, ecstatic surprise. It was more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. Landon stood beside her, his chest puffed out, a conqueror admiring his spoils. This car was the symbol of their absolute victory. I walked over to the car, carrying a clipboard. "There's just a little paperwork," I said with a smile. "Just have to sign the title over, the final piece of the retirement plan." I handed her the clipboard with the title and the attached addendum. She barely glanced at it, her eyes devouring the beautiful machine in front of her. She took the pen and with a flourish signed her name. Landon signed as the witness. They handed the clipboard back to me. It was done. The trap was armed. The getaway car was ready. And the entire city of Nashville was about to become the audience for their public shaming. What do you think is the most satisfying moment in a revenge plot? The planning, the execution, or the aftermath? Let me know in the comments. I took the signed title from the clipboard, folded it neatly, and placed it in my jacket pocket. It felt like the final click of a lock. "Well then," I said, my voice ringing with a cheerful finality that seemed to surprise everyone. "She's all yours, my dear. Why don't you and Landon take her for her maiden voyage?" Evelyn let out a giddy laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph. She threw her arms around me. "Oh, Henry, thank you. It's the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Her hug was brief and perfunctory, her eyes already devouring the car. She and Landon practically ran to the driver's side, their faces alight with the sheer joy of their victory. They were like 2 children on Christmas morning who had just been given the ultimate prize. Landon opened the door for her with a theatrical bow, and she slid into the driver's seat. He got in on the passenger side, looking out at the crowd with a smug, possessive grin. They were a king and queen ascending to their new chariot. I stepped back from the stage, and the valet, who was my accomplice for the evening, handed Evelyn the keys. She started the engine. It roared to life with a deep, throaty purr, a sound I had tuned to perfection. The sound of their impending doom. They waved to the cheering crowd, a final glamorous farewell, and then slowly drove the car off the stage and out of the ballroom, heading for the valet stand at the front of the hotel. The guests applauded, watching them go, believing they had just witnessed a beautiful, poignant moment of love and generosity. My son came to my side, his eyes a little misty. "That was a beautiful thing to do, Dad," he said. "I'm really proud of you." "The night's not over yet, son," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. I led him and a few of my oldest, most trusted friends over to the large ballroom window that overlooked the hotel's main entrance and the street beyond. "There's one more thing to see." Down below, the valets brought the pearl-white Jaguar to the front. Evelyn and Landon got in, laughing, their heads close together in a conspiratorial intimacy. They pulled out into the street and were immediately swallowed by the bright, bustling nightlife of downtown Nashville. It was a Saturday night, and the traffic was exactly as I had planned, a slow-moving river of headlights and taillights. We watched them go, their beautiful white car a beacon of their success. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. They moved a block, then stopped at a red light. They moved another half a block, then were stuck behind a slow-moving tourist trolley. And then, under the bright, unforgiving glare of the streetlights and the neon signs of the honky-tonks, the magic began. It started subtly, a faint, ghostly shimmer on the passenger side door. A small patch of the elegant pearl-white paint seemed to thin, revealing a hint of the angry red underneath. Then, as the engine heat continued to build and radiate through the steel body panels, the transformation accelerated. The pearl white began to fade, becoming translucent as if a layer of fog were burning off in the morning sun. And beneath it, the words began to appear, sharp and brutal in the city lights. On Landon's door, the word thief bloomed into existence. On Evelyn's door, L-I-. The crowd at the window with me gasped. My son stared, his mouth open, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Down on the street, people on the sidewalk began to notice. They pointed, they stopped, they pulled out their phones. A small crowd was gathering at the intersection. Evelyn and Landon, cocooned in their luxury getaway car, were still oblivious, still laughing, still celebrating. They were stuck in traffic, the engine getting warmer and warmer. Now the hood began to change. The elegant white evaporated completely, revealing the largest. And most damning word of all, painted in furious red across the long, beautiful hood, adulterer. The car was no longer a symbol of their success. It was a moving billboard of their shame. The moment they finally realized what was happening was a beautiful, silent little drama. Landon was the first to notice. He saw the people pointing, saw the phones aimed at them, and a look of confusion crossed his face. He leaned forward, trying to see what they were looking at, and then his eyes must have caught the reflection of the word THIEF in the side mirror or the window of a shop. His entire body went rigid. He turned to Evelyn, his face a mask of pure, horrified panic. She followed his gaze, and then she saw it. We could see her from the window, her hands flying to her mouth, her laughter dying in her throat. Their beautiful getaway car had become their prison. They were trapped in the middle of a traffic jam, in the heart of the city, in a car that was screaming their sins to the world. Horns began to honk behind them. A traffic light turned green, but they did not move. They were paralyzed, exposed, and utterly, completely humiliated. My revenge was complete. It was not a quiet, private victory. It was a loud, public, and undeniable masterpiece of poetic justice, rolling slowly through the heart of Nashville for all to see. What do you think is the best way to serve revenge? Quietly or as a public spectacle? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed the show. The scene on the street below descended into a beautiful, perfect chaos. A traffic jam had formed behind the paralyzed Jaguar, a symphony of angry horns providing the soundtrack to Evelyn and Landon's humiliation. We watched from the ballroom window as Landon, in a desperate panic, finally managed to get the car moving, swerving recklessly into a side street to escape the pointing fingers and flashing phones. Their glamorous getaway had turned into a frantic, shameful retreat. The small group with me at the window was silent for a moment, and then one of my old mechanic friends let out a low whistle. "Henry," he said, a slow grin spreading across his face. "That is the single best custom paint job I have ever seen." My son turned to me, his face a complex mixture of shock, horror, and a dawning, reluctant admiration. "Dad," he said, his voice barely a whisper, you knew everything." I simply put my arm around his shoulders. "Let's go home, son," I said. The aftermath was swift and fell into place with the satisfying click of a well-made machine. The videos and photos of the confessing car, as the internet quickly dubbed it, went viral. It was all over local news and national gossip blogs by the next morning. The story of the wealthy socialite and the slick financial advisor publicly branded as liars, thieves, and adulterers was too juicy to ignore. Their social and professional ruin was absolute. Landon was fired from his prestigious firm by noon the next day, his reputation as a trustworthy advisor incinerated. Evelyn became a social pariah overnight, a Nashville punchline. Their dream of a luxurious life together died on that traffic-choked street. Legally, they were trapped. The trust had been activated by Evelyn's signature on the title. But the hidden clauses my lawyer had inserted now came into effect. The bulk of my collection, my most valuable cars, were protected in a subtrust that required my son's signature as well as mine for any sale. They were untouchable. The only assets in the primary trust, the one they controlled, were a few of my less valuable cars and the now infamous Jaguar. They were left with a multi-million-dollar collection they could not sell and a car they could never, ever drive. A few weeks later, their lawyers contacted mine. They were willing to dissolve the trust completely, to walk away and relinquish all claims in exchange for my silence. I agreed. I did not need to speak. The car had already said everything that needed to be said. I never saw Evelyn again. I heard she moved out of state to live with a relative, her life of glamour and luxury replaced by one of quiet, well-deserved shame. Landon, I believe, is still facing legal trouble from other clients who came forward after his public disgrace. My life returned to the quiet, comforting rhythm of my garage. My son and I became closer than ever, our relationship rebuilt on a foundation of honesty. He started spending weekends at the workshop, not just watching, but learning. He had a natural touch with the engines, a feel for the metal that reminded me of myself at his age. One sunny afternoon, we stood together, looking at the Jaguar E-Type. I had it stripped down and repainted, this time in a simple, honest British racing green. It was just a beautiful car again, its secrets washed away. "What are you going to do with it?" my son asked. I looked at the car, then at him, at the faint traces of grease under his fingernails. "I think," I said with a smile, "we're going to restore it, together." My revenge was not in their ruin. It was in this, in the restoration of my own life. It was in the sound of a perfectly tuned engine, in the rediscovered bond with my son, and in the quiet, profound satisfaction of knowing that I had taken their treacherous vehicle of betrayal and turned it into a testament to my own survival. They had tried to steal my legacy, but in the end, they had only succeeded in making it stronger. That is how I got my so sweet revenge, and I would do it all over again. Thank you for taking this ride with me. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment telling me what you think the ultimate dream car is.